Going on, guys? Welcome back to the Florida Gators the orange and blue football coverage. Sorry about that. I forgot I changed the name of the channel. So in this video, we're going to be ranking Florida's toughest games on the 2024 schedule. This is an article from 247 Sports or Swamp247 written by Graham Hall, who covers the Florida Gators for CBS Sports. I did my own rankings of the games before this article had came out. And I already had like a preconceived notion about the schedule. And of course, Graham Hall has recently done his rankings of the schedule. And if you're a Florida fan, you've probably heard of this before, but this is possibly the hardest schedule in college football history because Florida will face 11 Power 5 teams, or at least what used to be known as the Power 5. Because the Pac-12 is gone, but we're not going to get into that. So Florida obviously has, the teams that they'll be facing: Miami, Sanford, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, UCF, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, LSU. No, excuse me, Georgia, Texas, LSU, then Ole Miss, then Florida State. Got it right. So obviously, no team has had that kind of a schedule before. And it's a critical year for Billy Napier as well. We've already gone through all this. So I'm going to be ranking you the easiest games to the hardest games whatsoever. Easiest being the number 12 and the hardest game being number 1. And we're going to figure out how the teams in the middle stack up. Here it is right here. I think it was pretty obvious that Sanford was number 12. There were 4 spots in me and Graham Hall's rankings where we actually had it exactly the same. Sanford obviously was number 12. It's an FCS school. It's the easiest. Florida did not have such a great showing against Sanford the last time they played, which was in 2021. But I really doubt Florida's going to need 70 points to beat Sanford like they did during that time. I just don't. I don't see it. I really find it hard to believe that game's going to come down to the wire like it did. That's obviously the easiest game on Florida's schedule. No disrespect to Sanford, but it is what it is. Number 11, Mississippi State. Again, I had Mississippi State at 11. So these were the 2 games right off the bat that me and Hall's rankings perfectly aligned. I like Jeff Lebby, the head coach hiring for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. But he's in year 1 of a program that had to take a severe, unexpected transition after the passing of Mike Leach. There was a head coach that was there before him, but he was only given a 1-year job. So, Mississippi State right now is on a 3rd head coach in 3 years. They don't have Will Rogers, who was their longtime outstanding quarterback, to pass the ball around. They acquired Blake Shippen from Baylor at the quarterback position. They just have a lot of holes on their roster, and it's going to take a while for Jeff Lebby to build them into being at least a respectable program. You don't really expect Mississippi State to be a perennial contender in the SEC with how expansive the SEC has become, with Texas and Oklahoma joining into the fray. And Mississippi State, if there is one road victory on the year for Florida that I can probably circle in and say, I'm the most confident about, it's by far Mississippi State, because the other games are Tennessee, Texas, and Florida State. So, and Billy Napier's go for one road victory a year. So if you can get one, why not let it be Mississippi State? At least get that out the way. They're gonna need some serious time under Jeff Lebby. This is a rebuild if we've ever seen one for this upcoming year in 2024. So Sanford 12, Mississippi State 11, obviously. UCF number 10. This is our first disagreement right here. He had UCF number 10, and I'm going to read to you why he put them there. UCF may very well be undefeated by the time the Knights make the quick trip up north to Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, and that's where the Swamp is. And the additions Gus Malzahn, former Auburn coach, made in the offseason, including quarterback KJ Jefferson from Arkansas and cornerback Deshaun Price. I don't know where he came from. With R.J. Harvey returning in the backfield, UCF may have the most talented running back the Gators will face this season. Well, that's saying something, considering they still have Georgia and FSU and Texas coming up. But the Knights are keen on making a statement in Florida's backyard. The big question here is UCF's defense, led by Ted Roof, their defensive coordinator. Last season, they were one of the worst teams when it came to stopping the run. Which should work in Florida's favor, considering Napier's history as a play caller, Billy Napier does love to run the football. So that is a good point. If the Gators can avoid glaring mistakes, the home field advantage should allow Florida to secure a victory on October 5th. And that game, UCF, is after Mississippi State, but there will be a bye week in between. So Florida will get a couple of weeks to focus their energy on UCF before they head on the road to Tennessee. He had UCF 10. Me personally, I put Kentucky at 10 because I made a record preview prediction video for Kentucky on my second channel, and I said that I don't think Kentucky's going to have a good year. I think they're going to go 5-7. They're changing offense coordinators, which I've learned that they've done it quite a few times over the last few years. They're changing quarterbacks again, and I think at some point for Billy Napier for Florida, you got to say enough is enough with these Kentucky guys. Like, we're better than these guys. We're more talented than these guys. We should be able to get automatic wins against these guys, even though Mark Stoops is a well-respected coach. I put Kentucky at 10 because I just don't think they're going to have a good year. I think this is one of those years where they fall off a little bit, and they go from a 7-win team to a 5-win team. You can't keep changing offensive coordinators the way that they did in quarterbacks, and then just rely on your defense all the time. Plus, that's the game at the time in which Florida will be playing Kentucky will be in mid to late October, and that's typically when Kentucky falls off. They'll start off good in late August and September, but then when October comes, their play tailors off, and I think that's a good time for Florida. And plus, they'll be done. It won't be before the Tennessee game. So Florida will be done with that, and they'll be looking at Kentucky as like, okay, here's a game where if things don't go well for us against Tennessee, this could be our fix-it game, so to speak, before they head into that final bye week of the year. So I put Kentucky at number 10. I'm just not sold on Kentucky this year. I think they're going to be a bad team. At number 9, here's where he puts Kentucky, and this is where I put UCF. But let me read to you why he put Kentucky here first. The Wildcats lost significant talent on offense, including quarterback Devin Leary, even though he wasn't good last year, so I think that might have been an addition by subtraction. Running back Ray Davis, who actually was pretty good, especially against Florida, and their offense coordinator Liam Cohen, who went to the NFL. Bush Hamden, I'm going to have to look him up, now running the show on offense. Kentucky is going to look to taking a step back, and they'll rely on Brock Vandergriff to do just that. Defensively, they have one of the more underrated units. They were the second best run defense in the conference last year with Deion Walker and Maxwell Hairston returning. This is not going to be necessarily an easy win. It's just that there are many talented teams ahead of Kentucky on the slate for Florida, which he's telling the absolute truth here. Instead of putting Kentucky here, I put UCF here, so I swapped. I had Kentucky 10, he had UCF 10, and he has Kentucky 9, I had UCF 9, because the fact that you have Gus Malzahn as a head coach, I think UCF will be better schemed and better game planned offensively. And you have KJ Jefferson, who played at Florida last year for Arkansas and beat Florida on the road, so he's not going to have those swamp jitters as some other teams could possibly have in years past. That's why I put UCF number 9. And the fact that they're right before the Tennessee game, there could be a chance that Florida could be overlooking them to play to looking at Tennessee on the road. So I would say UCF is number 9 in my opinion because of that said reason. Here we go to number 8, Texas A&M. I put Miami at this spot, number 8. When it comes to blue chip talent, there are a few teams ahead of Texas A&M. That is correct. Yet the Aggies must prove they can take a step forward under first-year coach Mike Elko, particularly from a protective standpoint on the offensive side of the ball. There are numerous questions from backfield to wideout. Defensively, they should shine in the trenches with Nick Skirleton teaming up with Shamar Turner to form a menacing pass-rushing duo. There are more questions in secondary. If the Gators can protect Graham Mertz and increase their number of downfield opportunities, Florida will have its chances, although this is without a doubt, a contest that could go either way despite Florida's home field advantage. Well, that's the same way I feel about Miami. I think that's a game that could go to either team, just like Texas A&M. I put Miami at number 8 because while they have a lot of talent, I respect the coaching staff of Texas A&M with Mike Elko and their offensive coordinator Colin Klein and some of the defensive hires that he made more than Mario Cristobal. Now, Miami improved in certain areas last year, but having Mario Cristobal as your head coach is why I'm more concerned about Texas A&M than I am Miami, because Mario Cristobal has just been a disappointment in Miami, a la Napier at Florida. But Mike Elko showed at Duke that he can, even with a talent deficiency, he can raise the level of play from his players without necessarily having the recruiting advantages that Texas A&M would provide rather than at Duke. So that's why I have Texas A&M at 7 and Miami at 8. And at number 7, he put Miami there. And here's what he wrote for Miami. The Canes are a 3-point favorite ahead of the season opener, and Coach Mario Cristobal has added one of the most highly coveted transfer quarterbacks in Cam Ward. Now, he may be highly coveted, but that doesn't mean he's the best quarterback, out there. He's good, but not one of the top. The offensive line should be a strength, an area of strength for Miami too. And Miami added one of the top running backs in the transfer portal in junior Damian Martinez from Oregon. He actually came from Oregon State, not Oregon. The third level of the defense is a question mark, although the defensive line should be a well-oiled unit for the Canes. I think the Canes have arguably the deepest front seven, especially at the defensive line of the entire ACC. Miami has an opportunity to turn a corner in 2024, yet the Gators have home field advantage on their side. The contest will be a barometer for success for each team, and Florida can't afford to hit to the momentum in the first week of this season, especially with all the opponents that they still have scheduled up. Miami, after Florida, will have, and I don't remember the particular order, but I think it's FAMU, Ball State, and then South Florida. I'll have to relook at that to be sure. But I put Texas A&M there because of like I said, I respect the coaching staff at Texas A&M, and I still think they have some good players, even though their 2022 class from insiders I've said has completely fallen off because Jim Fisher is no longer there, and that could hurt the depth of the Aggies. But I still fear Texas A&M more than Miami. At number 6, he put Tennessee. I put Florida State at this number. Let me read about Tennessee. Now led by former 5-star signal caller Nico, I don't know how to say his last name. The Volunteers will look to take a step forward on the offense this season, and they'll have Brew McCoy, Squirrel White at wideout to help the Volunteers make strides. There are questions at running back as the Vols look to replace Jabari Small, and Jalen Wright and Dylan Sampson will have to prove that he could be a full-time weapon in the backfield for Knoxville. Defensively, the Volunteers have the nation's top edge defender in James Pierce Jr., and he'll look to take a lead a Tennessee defense that led the SEC in tackles for loss of sacks in 2023. Playing in Needham is a tall task, and the Gators should have their work cut out for them as they look to avoid a mid-season loss to the Vols. But here, I put that game, Tennessee, I had them a little higher on this list, and I put Florida State at number 6. Here's why I put Florida State number 6. They lost a lot of talent to the NFL draft and to the transfer portal. Jordan Travis, Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Trey Benson, Jared Verse, Brandon Fisk, Jerrion Jones, Ronaldo Green, I believe, Nick Deloach, and just so many talented players on Jaheim Bell as well, Trey Benson, on both sides of the ball, particularly on offense, with the fact that Florida State has lost so much talent, and that could be a concern for their depth. And plus, Billy Napier has out-recruited Florida State. I think Florida State will be an easier game to play than Tennessee. And plus, I'm sure that Florida State will be much more beatable than Tennessee this year, because I think Florida State is downgrading a quarterback from Jordan Travis to DJ Uiagalelei. I think the Nico kid will be better at Joe Milton simply because of his accuracy. He's more accurate than Joe Milton. I think he'll be a better decision maker than Joe Milton. He'll play the position better than Joe Milton. Joe Milton is a big cannon, but he can't hit the broadside of a barn. And you saw that in the Florida game. You saw that in any game in which Tennessee had to rely on him to carry them to a victory. It just did not work well. And I think Tennessee will be better this year than last year because of the improvement at the quarterback position. So that's why I didn't have Tennessee at that list. Number 5, this is where we lined up perfectly, LSU. The Tigers will look to take another step forward in Brian Kelly's third season at the helm. They'll have multiple talented pieces back in Baton Rouge in the quest for a spot in the expanded college football playoff. Garrett Nussmeier takes over and under center for the reigning Heisman Trophy winner Jayden Daniels, although Nussmeier, the son of former UF offensive coordinator Doug Nussmeier, impressed in limited action, including a 395-yard performance against Wisconsin in the postseason. That's one of the biggest reasons why I have LSU in the top 5 in terms of hardest games here, because I think Garrett Nussmeier was a pretty good quarterback, and I think he'll have that passing attack for LSU good. He just won't provide the athleticism to add dynamic explosiveness to the offense the way Jalen Daniels did. And I think they'll be a little bit better on defense because they hired Blake Baker, who was the defensive coordinator at Missouri, and Missouri took a massive step forward on that side of the ball under him, and he was also a good defensive coordinator for the Miami Hurricanes. So I think LSU defense will be a little bit better, and I think Garrett Nussmeier will give them some good play in the passing game. He just won't provide the Jalen Daniels explosiveness running around for 200 yards on Florida's defense. But I think LSU is a tough matchup, and I quite frankly, I will always put them in the top 5 in terms of hard games for Florida this year. At number 4, he had Florida State. I had Tennessee here for the reasons that I've stated before, but I'm going to read to you what he said about Florida State. The Noles must replace multiple contributors from last season's team, which went undefeated in the regular season and yet was excluded from the college football playoff. If DJ Uyunglele can be nearly as effective, which is far easier said than done, and the two-time transfer will have to showcase improvement, FSU should be right back in the hunt for a college football playoff spot. Once again, Mark Neville's team has rebuilt through the transfer portal, adding pieces to the roster from around the Power 5 or 4, I guess, including Malik Benson and Jalen Brown. The defensive side has several question marks in need of answers, but the core group of returners give FSU a solid foundation to build upon, while the offense likely is going to experience some early growing pains. It's no surprise that the Noles are already projected by a touchdown. Projected to be favored by more than a touchdown this season, considering the standing of the two programs. So as of right now, I guess they're a touchdown favorite over Florida. We'll see where that game comes at the end of the season. Florida will have to stay healthy to handle the atmosphere at Doak Campbell to avoid another loss to their in-state rival. Well, that's the way he feels. Ole Miss. This is where we had another agreement here. I had Ole Miss at 3 as well. There's plenty of reason to believe the Rebels will be one of the SEC's and nation's top teams in 2024. They have Jackson Dart returning, giving Ole Miss one of the nation's most efficient signal carders from a season ago, and he proved to be a threat to score in multiple regards, and the offense benefited from the return of 3 proven wideouts, along with the transfer addition of Antoine Juice Wells. Defensively, the Rebels added talent in the trenches, securing commitments from former Texas A&M defensive lineman Walter Nolan and former UF standout Prince Umamiel. He never really stood out like that. He had athleticism, but he never really played up to his caliber. The additions in Oxford, coupled with the return of the key contributors, makes the November 23rd contest with the Rebels one of the toughest games on Florida's schedule. And that's their senior day, which means that's the last home game of their season. Texas, here's where we disagreed here. Texas, he had providing the Quinn Ewers-led offense with talent via the transporter was a priority for the Longhorns in the offseason, and the arrivals of Isaiah Bond, Silas Bolden, and Amari Niblack may be enough to avoid any sort of dip in the production for Steve Sarkisian's team in 2024. Remember, they're losing out on Jonathan Brooks, Adonai Mitchell, and Xavier Worthy, and also Javion Sanders. So that's a lot of production that they're missing from their passing core. And they're also losing, I think they also lost Byron Murphy. Yes, Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle on that side of the ball. The Longhorns will also return one of the top up-and-comers in the backfield, C.J. Baxter, to lead the rushing attack, giving Texas one of the nation's more potent offenses on paper heading into the 2024 season. To compete for a spot in the CFP, Texas will prove its defense hasn't lost a step, which remains a question after losing out on Devondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, as I said before, Jalen Ford, all turned pro after last season, and they should be one of the league's top teams in their first season, and they'll presumably be a double-digit favorite against the Gators when they travel to Austin, Texas on November 11th. The second week of November, I had Georgia here because while Georgia is Georgia, Texas is right after the Georgia game, and here he has Georgia number 1. But the fact that Texas will be playing Florida right after the Georgia game, if Florida gets pushed around the way they have by Georgia for the last 3 years, the last opponent that you should want to see afterwards in the conference is Texas, because Texas has the capability of doing the same thing to Florida. So playing those teams back to back, that's why you probably had those 2 teams at the top 2. I just had Texas rated above Georgia because of the fact that they're playing after Georgia rather than at least having a couple of weeks to, nurse your body and recover a little bit heading into that game, as opposed to what they do with Georgia. Kind of like what they do with Georgia, So that's why I have Texas as the highest as the hardest ranked game for Georgia. And I'm going to read to you why he had Georgia at number 1. After missing the CFP in 2023, the Bulldogs are aiming for a return at the top, and they have the season's leading passer from the season going Carson Beck, tasked with leading the back. Along with Beck, the offensive line returns all but one star from last season. Warren Brinson and Nazir Stackhouse return on the defensive side of the ball to lead along the way on the defensive line. Linebackers in there is strength 2, no shocker there. Small Mondrin Jr. and Jalen Walker looking to take a step forward in the 2024 season. If there's any weaknesses in Georgia's team, it's the secondary, which is replacing 3 starters from last season. It was Javon Bullard, who got drafted by the Green Bay Packers in the second round, and Kamari Lassiter, who got drafted by the Houston Texans in the second round as well. I don't know about the third guy. I can't remember his name. Concerning how the Dogs recruited in recent years, there should be little doubt whether or not the defense will have a more than capable option of stepping up. So those are the hardest games he has here. He has Georgia 1, Texas 2, Ole Miss 3, Florida State 4, LSU 5, Tennessee 6, Miami 7, Texas A&M 8, Kentucky 9, 10, UCF 11, Mississippi State, and Samford. I have Texas 1, Georgia 2, Ole Miss 3, Tennessee 4, LSU 5, Florida State 6, Texas A&M, Miami, Texas A&M at 7, Miami at 8, UCF at 9, Kentucky at 10, and I had the 11 and 2, the same as Mississippi State and then Samford. So that is my ranking for the toughest games on Florida's schedule this year.